Hey, what's up? The word fascist gets used constantly in modern political debates, especially online. It's become one of the most common accusations people throw at their opponents. But the problem is that the word often gets used without much understanding of what it actually means. Fascism isn't just another insult or a dramatic way of saying that someone is authoritarian or aggressive in politics. It refers to a very specific political ideology that developed during a very specific period in history. If we want to use the word responsibly, we need to understand where it came from and what it actually described. Modern fascism began in Europe in the early 20th century, especially in the years between World War I and World War II. The movement first came to power in Italy under Benito Mussolini in 1922 and later in Germany under Adolf Hitler in 1933. These regimes were formed in a time of extreme political instability, economic hardship, and widespread distrust in traditional institutions. In the aftermath of World War I, much of Europe was struggling. Governments were collapsing, economies were unstable, and many people felt that their nations had lost both dignity and direction. Fascist movements grew in that environment by promising unity, strength, and national renewal. The term fascism itself comes from the Italian word fascio, which means a bundle or group. It is related to the ancient Roman symbol called the fasces, which was a bundle of rods tied around an axe. The symbol represented authority and strength through unity. One rod could be broken easily, but a bundle bound together was much stronger. That symbolism became central to fascist ideology. At its core, fascism elevated the nation above the individual. Fascist thinkers argued that the highest political goal was the strength and greatness of the nation itself. Individual interests, rights, and freedoms were considered secondary to the needs of the state. Fascist systems therefore concentrated power heavily in a centralized government. Political opposition was suppressed, dissent was treated as disloyalty, and the state claimed the authority to direct nearly every aspect of national life. Another defining feature of fascism was its belief in mobilizing entire societies behind a single movement. Fascist leaders believed that the nation should be unified under one ideology, one party, and ultimately one leader who embodied the will of the state. In practice, this meant the creation of authoritarian governments that rejected pluralism and eliminated political competition. Independent media was censored, opposition parties were outlawed, and state propaganda was used extensively to shape public opinion. Fascist regimes also tended to glorify conflict and struggle. War and expansion were often portrayed as ways to demonstrate national vitality and strength. In Nazi Germany in particular, these ideas became intertwined with racial ideology and theories about biological hierarchy, which ultimately led to horrific crimes including genocide and mass persecution. These historical realities are why fascism is remembered as one of the most destructive political movements of the 20th century. Because of that history, the word carries enormous weight. It describes systems that eliminated democratic institutions, concentrated power in authoritarian leadership, and suppressed civil liberties on a massive scale. But over time, the meaning of the word has started to blur in everyday political conversation. Today, the term is often used much more loosely. In many cases, it has become a general insult rather than a precise description of a political system. People sometimes apply the label to any movement they dislike, regardless of whether the historical characteristics of fascism are actually present. This is where it becomes important to distinguish between strong political rhetoric and historical definitions. A democratic political movement that competes in elections, operates within a constitutional system, and functions within a framework of pluralism is fundamentally different from the regimes that historians describe as fascist. In the United States, the political system remains a constitutional republic with multiple parties, contested elections, an independent judiciary, and a decentralized system of government. These institutions exist specifically to prevent the concentration of power that defined historical fascist regimes. Political disagreements in modern democracies can be intense, and rhetoric can become heated. But disagreement alone does not transform a political movement into fascism. Democracies are built on the idea that citizens can strongly disagree about policy, leadership, and national direction while still operating within a shared constitutional system. Understanding this distinction is important because words lose their meaning if they are used too casually. When every political opponent is labeled a fascist, the term stops describing a specific historical ideology and becomes just another partisan insult. And when that happens, it becomes harder for people to recognize the real characteristics of authoritarian movements if they ever do appear. History shows that fascism was not simply a style of politics or a strong nationalist sentiment. It was a system that dismantled democratic institutions, centralized power in a single ruling authority, and suppressed opposition through force and coercion. Those historical facts matter. They remind us that the word fascism refers to a specific political structure that emerged in a particular historical context, not simply a label for political movements that some people strongly oppose. Learning the real history behind these ideas helps people discuss politics more clearly and responsibly. It allows us to recognize the difference between passionate democratic debate and the kinds of authoritarian systems that truly defined fascism in the 20th century. When we understand that history, we are better equipped to protect the principles that democratic societies depend on: open debate, constitutional limits on power, and the ability for citizens to disagree without turning political language into historical distortion.
Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Peace!